price can take a lot of different formats. With price comes cost. To your point of time and that being almost a form of currency for them, I think what it really comes down to for me as someone who is trying to master this more and more every day is like boundaries. And, boundaries are kind of the budget for your time.
Welcome to Style as Identity, a podcast by the Majority Group. Learn with us as we sit with the designers and founders who are shifting our understanding of the style status quo. We're your hosts. I'm Lola Catero.
And I'm Frankie Ikwuazom. Join us each episode as we learn from brands that are an extension of their values, identity, and aesthetic, and are super open about sharing the less talked about aspects of what they do. We're so glad you're here.
Okay, so welcome everybody to Reflections episode. If you haven't been with us during season 1, well, welcome. It's just Frankie and I.
Yeah, no guests. We love our guests, but they're not here today. And with Reflections, what we normally do is we go through so much with our guests and we learn in real time. And Reflections are really a time for us to just sit with what we learn, but also relate what we talked about to other things that we think are important.
Absolutely. And so...
Or maybe not important, but you know what I mean? Juicy.
Juicy. Yeah, juicy. Yeah, exactly what she said. So here we are today. You have just us on the mics, and we get into it. We talk about what we learned with Nia Thomas, Naomi Nomi, Wolven, and Raquel at Capable Designs.
And the theme is price.
Okay. I was thinking about the brands, and they're also different, but I thought of this thing that unifies all of them. All of them are really concisely matching aesthetic with the needs of their people.
Yeah, say more.
All of them, we talk about price of doing business, allocation of resources, and all of them are just trying to balance what they have and how to make it so the user, the wearer, gets what they need, but it also matches their vibe.
Yeah, we've made it an unofficial habit to get people to tell us who their brand is for, mostly because we just like to know. But something that stood out to me is that so many of their descriptions were not necessarily about what they're into or how they style themselves. It was around how they approach their lives, whether it's with Nia, it was sustainable living.
Mm-hmm.
And with Naomi, it was around, this is a working woman, though. That can take many forms and shapes, and I'm very serious about that. And then with Raquel, there was a part of people who value their privacy as a form of intellectual property, I guess IP, whatever. But I think that kind of made me so glad we asked that question because they all answered it in a similar way.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like when we created that question, we were just like, oh, this is good. It'll be such a jumping off point into some of these other things. And it really ended up exposing the fact that they all are designing for a person in full, not just an aesthetic that might catch their eye. It's less fleeting.
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely the designer's designer.
Yes.
And it's really interesting, too, because Nia and Capable are both knitwear collections, but could not have been more different in how they use that material to create things. And I liked that kind of contrast with them.
Yeah.
You know what came out that we hadn't really talked about before? We talked about doing this theme and really wanting to hear about the share of wallet. Where do they put money? Do you emphasize, you have $100, do you put it on creating more supply? Do you put it on marketing and what that looks like? But what came out for a lot of them was the financial stability to keep going and to sustain themselves as designers. And without that, you don't have a brand. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that knowing myself, that's something that I would definitely leave off the budget sheet. I would pretty much everything and not that. And to your point, hearing them talk about how you get to a certain point where there isn't fuel in the engine, the rest of the stuff start kind of falling to the side. And something that Naomi said too, which isn't necessarily related to herself, but was also people oriented, was when she talked about the people she works with and how that's also a big priority price wise. And I feel to your point, it's sustaining the people who sustain the business, but it didn't feel like that was the main reason. It felt like it was table stakes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I wish everyone thought that way, right?
Me too.
I often heard in business school, everyone's human resources and talent is the most expensive thing on your financial sheet. And it was always referred to as like, this is your biggest cost, but it's like, dude, that's the most valuable.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Hello? Come on.
Yeah.
Also, when you said human resources, it was the first time I heard that term as humans as resources.
Yeah.
And now I'm spooked.
Okay. Then let's bring it back to sustainability of self. So season 1, we interviewed Jay Jajal of Jaywalking, and Nia and Jay have something in common, that they were both like, we don't need you, Vogue.
Yeah.
And
being cool is dead.
Being cool is dead. And Vogue's like, you sure? Like, you sure? And it made me think that Nia is kind of like a hype beastie brand for luxe fabrics and lifestyle clothes. She literally has small batch because she has a slow process and works with people that make it with their hands, and that shit does sell out. And she can't just make it.
Right. Because we were talking about this earlier, we were chatting, and I did sleep on some of Nia's stuff, specifically these cute pants that I really wanted, mostly because I was like, it's giving broke month and I need to reallocate my resources to August. And so I went on a couple of weeks ago, and I mean, shame on me, they're not there anymore.
No.
Nia, please bring them back.
Yeah.
I'll find the item number. And I really love that you brought this up, because something that it made me think about is when we think about hypebeast brands, so much of the high demand for it comes from a sense of scarcity.
Manufactured.
Yes, it's manufactured. It's kind of hacked in a way where people are like, we know if we market this as something that's going to sell out, people are going to come running and they're going to line up and they're going to be here from 6 a.m. even earlier. And something about Nia is like, she's intentionally slow. And so because of that, they're just, you've got to get it while it's hot if you want it. And I feel like it's interesting to see the difference between something that is low stock, high demand because it's engineered that way. It's a marketing tactic. It's part of the insider feeling of it, versus something that it's like, oh no, this is just foundationally rooted in our values as a company and how we approach business. And so, yeah, there's less of it because of that.
For brands like Nia Thomas, like, don't sleep on it, but then also wait for it. Because it's going to take a minute.
Yeah. Okay, so community. That also came up. Let's talk about it.
I think what's interesting about Wolven is they built their community first, and that has proved to pay in dividends as they expand their product. And, they're saying like, hey, what about a yoga mat? Like, you outfit me. It's awesome. I love it. Like, help do that more. If they didn't start with community, it'd be a lot harder, I think, to build their ecosystem of products to meet their audience, because so many brands are trying to find who that target is. And like, they've known from day one. Okay, we have to talk about the New York hustle.
Yes, because although we are a global podcast, and that's one of our favorite things about doing this.
Yes, it is.
We are both based in New York.
Yes. So what I love, Nia, right, her side incomes to fund the brand. Model, selling vintage, coat check. And it's like she did what she needed to do, and she used time and money as levers. They are constraints for most of us, especially startup brands, but she used them as levers to help keep things going. And Nomi had her own hustle.
Nomi did have her own hustle. She thought super quickly on her feet in one of the, larger milestones of the past few years, her wedding. And she figured out how she could survive as a business longer than just the next month ahead. And that was a decision that she was like, would I make it again? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did it necessarily fit what my vision for what I wanted for this time in my life? I don't know, but it just made sense.
Yeah. I think by making her own wedding dress, using it as a PR piece to then generate sales to keep her brand going, her and Nia have their namesake as their brand essentially. And like, they give themselves fully to their brand, but they also seem to protect their sense of self in a way that they don't compromise themselves for a sale. And like, even Nomi, when she was talking about, do I want to do this thing? That does give a piece of herself that she hadn't given before. And, she did have that conversation. And I really like that it does go back to that stability and thinking of ourselves as a cost too. And I thought that was just really mature and eye-opening for the realities of running a business.
Yeah. And we knew this going into it. We were like, okay, price can take a lot of different formats. With price comes cost, and what's the monetary cost? But to your point of time and that being almost a form of currency for them, I think what it really comes down to for me as someone who is trying to master this more and more every day is like boundaries. And, you know, boundaries are kind of the budget for your time. And they both, boundaries
are the budget for your time.
And I guess energy.
Yes.
I thought it was cool that she said, I know what I'm giving away here, but this is what needed to happen.
And did a cost benefit analysis?
Yes. I was 2 seconds away from saying that.
Nerd alert.
Talk business to me.
And then another thing that when I was like, you know, Nia, Nomi, they, you know, their businesses aren't like wildly different. But what I liked is, so Nia is not just D2C. She is in retailers and wholesale, and then she also does some IRL events. And I was chatting with her, and she's about chit-chat. And I was like, give me your data. And she was like, for sure. Actually, shout out to Nia here, because I was like, hey, only give what you're comfortable with, but I'm really curious to know what your breakout mix is between your e-com site, your wholesale sales, and IRL, pop-ups, private showroom, etc. And she is about 50 to 60% wholesale is funding the business. And that helps her meet production minimums. So that keeps her able to do what she does. D2C or e-com is 30 to 40%. And then like in-person sales and stuff is 10 to 15. And she has desires to even out that reliance a bit more. But I wanted to share that because also right now, Naomi Nomi is in 3 stores and working on their 4th as they expand. Wolven has D2C and in retailers also. And I think we can feel like there's a lot of pressure, especially starting a brand of like, oh, I need to have this beautiful e-com site, and oh, I need to be on all these retailers. And especially like 5 or 6 years ago, D2C was the play. Everyone's like, oh, you're doing retailer? Like, ew. And then now they're like, actually, bro, like this is a way to diversify where your money is coming from and like have a reliance that people are going to be ordering from you. And then retailers have their own audience, right? So it just makes sense. And I wanted to bring that up because I think it reminds us that there is no one way to do it. Figure out what makes sense for you, your brand, what's going to sustain your sense of self.
100%.
And just, you know, ignore the haters.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, figuring out your mix. I mean, if we were to talk to Nia again, I would definitely ask her. I know she says she told you the reality versus the desires. Also, Nia through and through, like the first time we met her, remember when she talked about how she wasn't about the gatekeeping? And like the fact that she shared this with you, I think is very...
Well, because she was like, this is important for people to know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank you.
Doing the real work.
She is.
But yeah, I mean, if we were to talk to her some more, which we probably will, I would ask her like reality versus desires. Like, do you go in knowing your mix? Do you test? Is it like out of necessity? And then when you get in a place where you can have more control budget wise, you adjust. I have more questions for Nia.
Yeah. Nia will be knocking on your door.
You said something that made me think about Raquel, but I was like, let's wait. Let me be patient until it feels natural. But it was when you were talking about Nia and Nomi's sustainability of self, or just, you know, how they think about that. And you talked about cost in a way that wasn't just the way we normally process it. And Raquel, nobody's doing it like she's doing it.
Nobody.
Her process is so cool. One of my favorite questions that you've asked, which is saying a lot because you ask a lot of questions I like, is how did you determine clothing for the best way to solve this problem? Which is, you know, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, go check it out, but we'll sum it up for you real quick. She's basically using Capable to say our facial recognition, for one, but also all forms of biometric data need to be protected. And a really natural way to do that is through the clothes that we choose to put on every day, because it's with us, it's moving with us. Like, it's not like an extra thing you have to carry. And what I really liked about our episode with her or chat with her is how she's learned so much by intersecting 3 areas that oftentimes like are pretty siloed.
Yeah.
Our privacy, technology, fashion. And when you think about technology and fashion coming together, usually I think of something like clunky as fuck. Like, you're going to be wearing a machine. But she started with knitwear, which, going back to the common thread between her and Nia, is some of the most comfortable stuff you can be in. So
someone said this during the episode, but we're like talking about the associating price and cost. And actually, you said it, Frankie, And you
I
said
did not.
associating price and cost with value. And what is the value of our data? And she's like, it's the most valuable. It is priceless. And I was like, fuck, you're right.
It is priceless.
It's priceless. And yeah, she just kind of flipped it on the head and made me think about garments. You know, we've talked about its expression. It's how we present ourselves. It can be how we hide ourselves, how we want to show up in the places and spaces that we are going. And this is another version of just that, but in just a profound way that I think actually responds to the world today. Mm-hmm. She mentioned, like, you know, she's like, I'm wearing this watch and it's changed so much over the years. It is like digital. It does all these things, whereas like before it just told time. She's like, our clothes haven't made this similar advancements in innovation. And I was like, you know, that's really true. I haven't seen that.
Also, like, how do you price something that protects something that's priceless?
And the pricing, she's just like, it's actually quite accessible considering she doesn't take into account the cost of making something priceless.
Exactly.
When she was talking about wearing something that is having us opt out of consenting, it made me think a lot about when we wear things and someone's on the street catcalling us or something, and then someone's like, well, you shouldn't be wearing this short skirt. And it's like, by what I'm wearing, I'm not consenting to you. And they put it back on the person. And I'm like, oh, it's interesting and sad. But she's making a whole line of stuff that is actively opting out of consent. And I think we do that in nuanced ways, right? Like if I'm going somewhere and I don't want X attention, then I'm going to change how I show up because it's just not worth the mental burden, right? So we I think do that in certain ways today. But now, because of what technology, the hold it has over us and the power it has on taking the DNA, like our biometric data, now we're actively having to opt out. And it's a little sad.
Yeah. Oh, damn. Yikes. It's interesting because so much of that, like, consent is permission, like, you know.
Like, no one gave you permission.
Yeah, permission to interact, permission to record, like, I don't know, just straight up basic permission. And then also like the choice in giving that permission, to your point, because I think I don't realize myself doing that, but I definitely will do that in little ways where I'm like, oh, I know like X, Y, and Z is going to happen, so I'm going to do this. And usually that does make its way into how I dress.
Yep.
Or even if I know I'm going to be coming back late one night, like it should not, the only thing that should determine what I choose to wear is the temperature, the vibe, like where am I going and how I'm feeling that day, what I want to say. But I do find myself doing that where I'm like, okay, I'm going to be on this train late, like let's button it up, you know, which no, we shouldn't have to do that. But to your point, like that is something that she kind of bakes in to the clothes that it's pretty effortless. Like we don't even have to think about it.
Yeah. It also makes me realize this is not new, right? It's made its way into UI and the way we interact with most websites, especially in the US, who has been a little bit late to adopt some of the policies in Europe where like instead of opting into marketing messages or whatever, it's like we have to actively opt out. They're like, we're going to take these liberties and start spamming you unless you
follow this rabbit hole.
Yeah. Like set your boundary because we don't have one for ourselves.
We're stepping over it.
Yeah.
I know I die every time I have to, especially when I'm like shopping and every time I go to a new window to the learn more or something like that. And then you go and you like literally toggle off everything. If that's your choice. Some people are like, take my data. You already have it.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's similar, like the world we're in today as a result. And it's interesting to see the different ways it manifests. Hopefully policy will catch up at some point. But until then, I'm going to be wearing my sweater around.
Yes. And it's so applicable globally too, which I really appreciate. And she's thought of that. Accessibility is something that she focuses on price-wise, but she also talks a lot about being made in Italy and like some of those Italian practices to designing and making clothing. And so she does balance, I want this to be accessible price-wise, but I also want it to be quality. And that is what you're paying for as well. Which I think oftentimes people think like there is tension there. You're like, sometimes I have to make some choices because I got to make a buck and then I want someone else to be able to buy this with said buck. But I think she talked about those two as if they were no-brainers to think about simultaneously. Yeah, totally. Okay, also I kind of like that when you wear her sweater, it changes us to be like an animal. It's like, are you a giraffe? And I'm like, that's fun, right? It's not all serious. It's like you can just have some fun with it. I loved that. I know. It's like real life animojis. Absolutely.
The one other thing that I liked is her mention of the SDGs. And I've heard this come up throughout conversations a lot, especially people in fashion that are of sustainable mindsets. I did want to share it with the audience because if you don't know what the SDGs are, they are 17 goals that the UN put out that all the countries in the UN are behind. Of like, these 17 things are really important for us to get behind, have events, have initiatives, have tasks. And it is a way to anchor a brand in something that they care about, to say, hey, we are focused on making progress in these 3 of the 17. And so I think it's a really nice way for brands that are interested in making impact in the world. And you can look at them and find the one or few that you're most attached to and use that to anchor your brand and use to as a framework so we're all swimming together in the right direction. So I definitely wanted to call that out.
Yeah.
But that's it. I'm done now. Like,
You're done?
That's it. That's all I wanted to say. Yeah.
Okay, so like, are we gonna wrap this baby up?
I'm gonna wrap this baby. So SDGs, baby.
This was a cool one. I'm gonna give you kudos for setting this theme up.
Thank you.
Before the season started. Like,
it
you
came
were like,
from you, listeners, because you're like,
yeah,
I want to hear about this.
I love that you did that. Lola, I gave you kudos. You passed it on to the audience. Everyone's getting love. It's one of those themes that I think can feel, you're like, oh, price, what are you going to talk about?
Finances.
Yeah, like, get me a coffee. But it is the backbone in one of the ways in which a business is able to keep businessing. And so talking about it kind of opened up all these like sub themes that I feel like, whether it's future season or just for us curious learners, we can look into. But also I think for those of you that really want to start a brand, this is maybe one of the more tactical, applicable things, regardless of what your brand is, whether it's in fashion, whatever it is, whether it's just a podcast. This idea of how do you allocate what you have and try to make it so that things that you prioritize get attention, and then things that you can't predict, but have a hunch you'll need to prioritize in the future, you can actually like get to that point, right? Like as a brand and as a business. So I'm so glad we did this theme, and it took many different formats. I feel like I learned a lot.
Yes.
And yeah.
And you haven't gotten this by now, but we could take almost any brand in any theme and put it in most, if not all, of the other themes.
True.
And that was
materials.
It's intentional. Actually, all 4 brands we talked to in this one all are unisex, gender-free, whatever you want to call it. They all have a hyper focus on materials.
Yep.
And they also heritage. I mean, the work that the artisans use to make Nia Thomas's knitwear and just XYZ. So we zero in on these, but these brands are, you can explore them and learn, right? We're nuanced and there's a lot to us. So cool, yo.
Yay.
Frankie, I love you.
Oh my gosh. Love you too.
And Erica, our producer.
Yeah. Erica puts up with us.
Look at you. Thank you, Erica. And thank you all listening. Anyway, see you next time. Damn, I love these brands.
Same. I mean, I love that they're just into getting on a podcast and having a very real conversation about what's enabled their brand to survive.
I love it. Okay, let's keep learning together. And all you out there, if it's in your journey to make a purchase today, check out some of the brands we've been talking to.
And if it's in your journey to show us some love, hit that subscribe button.
See you next time.
Bye.